Hello there, this is Stuart Davidson and this is the Construction Cashflow Show. And this evening I'm interviewing Mark Austin, and Mark is a change management expert. Mark's had a long career, 25 years as senior leader in construction industry. His passion for improving and transforming the industry culminated in the establishment of Austin Wright Limited. And he's here to talk to us about innovation and how he helps his customers to implement change with a people first and technology second approach. So Mark,
what services you're offering, what challenges that you're looking to provide solutions for, what it is, product and service that you can provide your clients with at this time.
So sort of three areas really I focus on. The first is clearly with a long background of leadership and roles in innovation and infrastructure. It's helping companies out where they may have a need or a challenge, and just doing some consultancy work. So that's part of it. Second part is helping people manage change. So if a company's got a particular challenge, or how you might think about going and dealing with change management. There are a couple of other things that we do. So one is we work with companies to look at research and development and what they're doing. And I work with a company called Rift, who are consultants in that area. And they can help companies release cash. So if they're doing genuine research and development, they can get a tax credit back. So simple things that can help.
Yeah, definitely.
And the sort of tools that we might be talking about here, they may qualify. Not say they will, but they know.
Absolutely, yeah.
And they're really the things I'm focusing on. But that's not a scalable business with just me and some help around. So what we're also doing is developing a software tool. So how can we use some of this 21st century stuff to help manage change? Yeah. So we now have a working prototype, which I'm road testing at the moment with external events that are going on in the world. And as we know, some pretty challenging stuff.
Absolutely.
But I'm using it as a case study just to prove that a lot of time it's external change that's costing you. And how do you manage it effectively? And how, when it get through it, how do you come back out of it? And why did you make those decisions at the time you did?
That's really interesting, you know, because as we were saying earlier, you know, I find as a quantity surveyor, it is those external challenges that actually change the cost of the project. You know, we can start off with a square meter rate or a unit rate for an item, but that unit rate changes the moment something changes to affect the circumstances upon which you're going to carry out that work. And I find quite often it's sequencing is the big thing, whereas you might start with a price bill of quantities, and if the sequencing is different or the sequencing gets changed, an item which is £5 per metre square becomes £15 a metre square, you know. And then this is why I think some projects go over budget. They get the tenders, or it's tendered, or it's estimated at the beginning, but maybe not enough thought around external fact. How are the external factors going to affect that rate?
Planning is a really great example. So we all know the planning process is complex, take a long time. And then you've got one is what you started with, what you ended up with for the last planning submission, which may be different. You then get the conditions that go with the approval, which may put additional constraints or what's the right word I'm looking for? Or condition precedents on starting.
Yeah.
So it could be, I don't know, surveys for ecology. It could be approval of a section 278 and doing some roadworks before you can start. So then that's another complexity. And then from that, you've then got a discharge of condition. So that may bring in some other changes. So before you've even started doing anything on the project, you could have gone through 4 changes.
Yeah.
And it may not affect the material numbers greatly, as in steel, concrete, reinforcement.
Yeah.
But it may have drastically increased the amount of design time. Because you may have already gone through 2 or 3 iterations.
Yeah, absolutely. And what would your advice to be? So we're planning a project, and we're looking at all the traditional approaches to planning a project. We're developing a program, we're doing a bill of quantities, we're working out the prices, etc. What else do you think we could bring in terms of project planning around how we manage, how we might envisage what changes might come into that, might affect that project? So is there any way we can kind of plan and say, right, okay, this is the project, but these are external factors that we could factor in now so that we can manage them as we go along?
This is the really challenging question. And if we can get to that place, we'll be much better off for it.
Yeah, definitely.
I think with the tools we have, we could start to look at what are typical planning conditions that we know are going to happen.
Yep.
So it might be a BREEAM assessment, ecology studies. Now we know what times of year we can do all these things. So you should be able to have a real good stab at when you can realistically start. Then there are going to be ones that are bespoke. There are going to be ones that are specific for that use case. And those are ones that you want to concentrate on, but not get distracted by the other ones that are stuff we have to do all the time.
Absolutely. Yeah. So,
and I think that's where tools, if you start to track it and compare, you'll then start to get a picture. And there are some really great tools out there that are really pushing that, using AI. So a couple that would spring to mind are Nplan and Nodes and Links, who are doing some really advanced stuff on program analysis. And they're starting to compare and contrast hundreds, if not thousands, of projects from schedules. So I know Nplan quite well. So they, I think, have over 4 million objects in their database from programs. And they are running algorithms to look at the difference between the start and the finish, as planned versus as built. And then from that, trying to predict how long it should take. And effectively doing a really sophisticated Monte Carlo analysis on the likely outcomes.
That's really, really interesting. I think that AI and using the machine learning and this kind of thing is the way of the future. I think it's going to be something that, construction can really use to its advantage. I think there's a lot of times, we're still using, as you say, 20th century methods to run projects when we've got tools like that can be used as predictive, particularly if we're doing a sequence of projects or a certain type of project, and then it can start to learn and predict, and that become more and more accurate.
So I think there's other tools such as Disperse, which are looking at using computer vision to measure what you've done on projects, and link it to the program. You've got other work that's being done by people like Martin Paver, these project data analytics community, and he's looking at setting up data trusts. So basically, anybody who wants to be part of a trust gives their information to it, and then they can pool it with other contractors, other clients, to try and gain insight from a wider pool.
That sounds really interesting. That's amazing. That really does sound like a step forward, a step into the right direction of being able to share data and use it to the best advantage. And one of the things I've been looking at in terms of payments and cash flow, and my background profession is the concept of micro milestone payments. And quite often, traditionally we'll have milestone payments related to a large chunk of the work or a large element, or we might have periodic payments where we're saying, oh, we'll value the work each month, but it's not necessarily particularly accurate, and it also lends itself to long payment periods. So, from the top down, the payment periods get longer and longer. So something I was kind of looking at, the possibility of micro milestones. So you're measuring the work much sooner. So maybe on a weekly basis. This is all to try and get the cash flow moving much quicker, to make sure we got the resources moving quicker and getting into people's bank accounts much quicker, albeit might be smaller chunks, but more regularly. And so it's looking at, but the challenge with that is the cost of measuring the works on a weekly basis, or measuring those micro milestones. So we might say, okay, one of the milestones, we're going to be looking at this on a area to area. So for example, if we chopped the project up into small geographic locations and looked at, okay, what is the progress of each trade within that particular area, and that becomes a milestone, which would be great and could be computerized. But the thing is with it is how we physically measure that on site. Traditionally,
so there are tools that do this.
Yeah.
And so if we take BIM, I priced my first job using BIM in 2011.
Wow.
We estimated a project and the quantities from a very early stage BIM model, but we did it off the BIM model. Did take off. So this stuff is doable. So if you look at some of the work that's going to come out of High Speed 2, where they're looking at true digital end-to-end construction. So you design it digitally, you build it digitally, you verify it digitally, and you get paid. So as you've completed the work and verified it digitally, it's complete.
Yeah.
You get paid on what's been completed.
Yeah.
So there are some verification tools, and I will declare an interest. I work with one of them, but disperse. And what they are doing is genuinely, from a 360 video camera, just a picture, week by week, they'll compare what's been built.
Wow, that's amazing. That's a big step forward, a really big step forward.
And so these tools are using the 21st century technology.
Yeah.
So I remember trialing it 2 years ago, my previous role. And we had some vandalism one weekend and we weren't sure what to do. But we remembered on the Friday, we'd done a scan. And this is not a complicated scan. It's literally a picture. Move to the next room, picture, up to the cloud. We did exactly the same thing Monday after the vandalism. And by 12 o'clock the following lunchtime, we had a full video damage report.
Wow, that is amazing.
Because we could see between the two whether it was a 5 grand problem, 10 grand problem, whatever it was.
Yeah.
So is it 1 or 2 doors, or was it much bigger?
Yeah.
So that enabled us to give a snapshot and work out whether we needed to notify it, insurers, or it was a problem we had to deal with ourselves, or whatever. It informed our decision process. Still got to go through a process.
Yeah.
So when you start to see that sort of use case, that really starts to help you.
Yeah.
And I think the way I would sum it up was, it was a light bulb moment for me when I said, "You're giving me something I've never had." And he said, "What's that?" I said, "Well, the truth on where the project is." Because I know, because it's verified against the model, what actually has been complete. Whether it's 37.5% or 60% or whatever the number is.
Absolutely, yeah. And can you tell from that type of software whether the work? So, for example, if you was measuring work or measuring progress, could you tell from a software like that whether that work is actually built to the specification and drawings and it's actually been correctly installed?
And that's where we're going.
Mm.
So it's basically built the approved drawings, a virtual model. And what these tools will do will just tell you what's different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we come back to our change point. It may be that it's been changed.
Yeah.
Yes, but it will just say it's different.
Mm.
It doesn't say it's wrong. It
Yeah.
says it's different.
Yeah.
And therefore, you would give you a spotlight to go and have a look and investigate.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're only really having to investigate the things that are different rather than going and having a look to see if everything's the same, if you see what I mean.
Yeah. Exactly.
So it's less time expended, so you can pinpoint where it needs to be, where you need to look at. And, I should imagine 80% of the time you'll know, well, we know that's going to be different because, so
Exactly. But there was one case sticks in my mind where the corridor hadn't progressed 2 weeks, and it was all held up on a detail for a riser, which meant none of the second fix of the plasterboards and light fittings and all that could be done.
Mm.
But it was only because it was on stop for 2 weeks running.
Yeah.
Well, why is that?
Mm. Yeah.
And it was one TQ that hadn't been answered.
Yeah. And that's holding the whole thing up.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's the importance of change control, isn't it? Really
Exactly.
drive home in change control.
I think there's two parts that we always forget. One is the cause, and one is the effect.
Yeah.
And we always spend a long time on the effect.
Yeah.
Do we really understand the cause?
Mm. And quite often on a traditional project, we never do get to the bottom of the cause, do we? Unless we've got these tools to measure, and we're doing that on a regular basis, then sometimes the cause gets lost, doesn't it? Because it gets clouded and the work progresses and moves on, and the original cause gets clouded and very difficult to identify the facts around it.
I think it's compounded as well.
Mm.
You get talk about this all day, but you get one change, which then another one comes on top of it. So the first one might not have been a problem. The second one starts to compound.
Mm.
You get a third one on it.
Mm.
All of a sudden it goes huge.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you get the compound nature as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think if you don't catch them as they go along, then it's almost impossible to unravel, isn't it? And I think that's where a lot of disputes end up, is because the facts get buried, not because someone's burying them, it's because things move on. You haven't picked up what actually happened or what the actual cause was, or what compounded the cause, or what part of that compounding effect actually ended up with the overall effect of what it had. And I think that what you're doing, Mark, in terms of change control is much needed, and also bringing it into the 21st century using the right tools and how we can manage projects much better is absolutely fantastic. And it's kind of parallels in what I'm trying to achieve in terms of how we structure, how the industry pays for its products and services, how the supply chain gets paid, and how we move that cash through the system much quicker. And I can see that these type of tools could make a massive amount of difference.
I think there were two issues with cash flow, and we've had this discussion before. One is about the measured work you've done, and the other is the work you've done you haven't yet measured.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or understand you've been instructed. And most of the time, the clients don't realise the amount of change they've instructed.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have a discussion. And there's always a way through it. But if you want to get the cash flow, you need to understand what you've been paid to build, what you've built.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
And why.
And I think that's where we're definitely going to need to look at using more sophisticated tools, I think, going forward, and be a lot more streamlined and be more accurate about how we measure stuff.
And I'm very mindful that I've worked in large infrastructure projects where you can do this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And not all projects are the same. They've got the long durations. You haven't got the overhead on site to be able to manage these tools. And I think as we get through the next 3-5 years, the tools will become a bit more integrated. When I come back, they all do one thing really well.
Yeah.
And how do you get 2, 3, 4, 5 to combine?
Yeah.
So that you get the real value at a cost-effective point.
Yeah, exactly.
And the period we're in at the moment, I believe personally, we will see such progress in R&D, technology, use of tools. So let's throw ourselves back 6 weeks, Stuart. We probably would have met to do this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. So everybody's getting used to doing these online meetings and using online tools, and actually the nation is becoming more, well, I think it's dragged people into the 21st century in a way that we weren't doing online meetings before. One of the things I do, I go to Toastmasters meeting, which you always meet together, and it's kind of a speakers training group, and that group is now doing online meetings, can you believe, on a Zoom meeting, and it's gone from being a little group in the Quakers Hall in Maidstone to now having people from all over the world joining in the meeting. So it's like absolutely amazing how things have changed, Something I wanted to ask you actually, and then coming back to talking about this current situation with the shutdown, and we know that there are businesses, construction sites still going on where they can, and we've seen the fast track work that they've done with the Nightingale Awards and things like that. So there are projects going, but there's a lot of projects that are slowing down or closed or shut down. What do you think we can or would need to be done? Because at some point in the future, maybe whether it's 2 months or 3 months or 4 months, they're going to have to regroup and come back and start off at where they left off, and I would hope that a lot of contracts or contractors would have taken stock, drawn a line in the sand, measured where they're up to. But they've got to go back and pick things up again. And in terms of, and that's a change, isn't it? It's kind of a change because, contractors, subcontractors, the supply chain, are they in this, are they still going to be in the position they were in a couple of months' time to come back and pick that work up? But, how do you think that managing change or something we could do to help pick these sites up again? I mean, where do you think the starting point would be, to get them back? Okay, guys, we need to pick this up again.
And I think being a professional person, I think the work that the Construction Leadership Council are doing with Seeker, Build UK, and all of the federations should really be our first port of call to answering that.
Yeah,
because I wouldn't want to comment and make something that wasn't right.
Yeah,
and I think the collective view that's currently going on, and Seeker in particular, really good. So Civil Engineering Contractors Association are publishing daily guidance.
Yeah.
So I think as the situation develops, that's a great place to start. And with the Construction Leadership Council aligned, I think looking at those tools, that information that's coming out and guidance will start to inform us. I have seen this week from insurers some really great resources on what you might want to do and things to think of.
Yeah.
And of course, every site will be different. And I haven't really got my head into not having a live site to manage anymore. I haven't really got into my thought process about the restart. Maybe 3 or 4 months time, we shall see.
Yeah.
But I think it's complex. I do, coming back to my art, I am part of a retail business as well. And from that environment, it's, if we're not safe to operate, we don't.
Yeah.
I think it'll be the same coming back out.
Oh, absolutely.
We still got people self-isolating, etc. Then we're not safe to open.
Yeah, absolutely.
I haven't got a more considered answer than that.
Yeah, I think we're all kind of, there's a lot of thinking, and you're quite rightly, Construction Leadership Council, Seeker, and people like that. So for listeners, they're thinking about, well, what am I going to do? How am I going to start up? What's going to happen? Then they can follow those organisations, follow what they're issuing to try, so that they keep abreast of the latest guidance and developments, really.
CITV have got a good resource as well.
Yeah.
On this specific issue.
Yeah. So it's interesting times. I think things are changing. I think it's a catalyst for change as well. And, it's difficult times for everyone at the moment. But surely I think there'll be opportunities coming out of this, for businesses to regroup, reshape, and to do things in a new ways, a new innovative way. So that's really interesting, Mark, and it's really interesting to talk about change control, innovation, how we can manage things, how we can take things forward, what tools we can use. And it's nice to talk about that, because often on construction, people ask about it but not necessarily know where to begin to look or know what's available, so at least we're getting to a point where we're saying, there are things available, they're still in a state of development. You can get some funding if for research and development, and maybe that's something people can look at investing in, particularly at this time where sites, maybe sites are not so productive. It's a bit more time. Maybe they can start to look at some research and development into these things to move the industry on.
I mean, from one of the Seeker publications yesterday, there was a great resource on free e-learning. So I signed myself up today, and I'm doing some more deep research on lean. I know about lean, but not to practitioner level. So I've signed myself up for 4 or 5 hours of tuition. Yeah,
actually similar to me, because the RICS are allowing its members now to use some of its resources free, whereas before it was charged for. So iServe and the CPD stuff. So I'll be dipping into that, because they've got some really good trainings on there, and that's really good for the RICS to do that for its members. So if you're an RICS member listening in, that's something you can do in a quiet time. You can get your CPD up to date, do some self-development, learn about areas that of interest that might be of interest to you, ready for things to start up. And no doubt there'll be some trainings on there around research on the current situation and that kind of thing. So okay, so just before you go, just a couple of things I wanted to talk about before we get on to how people can contact you in terms of professional services, etc. And a little bit light-hearted, but so that people can kind of get to know you a little bit more and with your background. I'm going to just throw some random questions at you now. And so if you could have dinner with any famous person, who would it be and where would it be?
Antonio Gaudi, Barcelona.
And why would you choose that one?
I love wood, love glass, amazing designer.
Yeah.
And just inspiration.
What 3 things would you put in your bucket list?
Professional artist. I haven't got 2 more.
We can see where your passion is, Mark. Yeah. What's your favourite art then? Is that your favourite art then?
Wood, anything to do with wood sculpture,
Yeah.
carving, turning, that sort of stuff.
Mm. So, what would be your favourite holiday?
Probably going to New Zealand for my 5th time.
Ever so much for coming on the podcast. And so, if viewers, listeners wanted to get in touch with you, they want some advice around what you do around change control, wanted to get to know you, how can they get hold of you? Could they connect with you?
So the best place is LinkedIn. It's Mark Austin. I'm on there. People connect through. That's I find is just a great resource, and a very supportive community who just help each other. So that's my first bit. There is a website which is austinwright.co.uk, and that's really the best ways.
Well, thanks very much, Mark. And I hope you've all enjoyed listening to Mark and talking about change control and things he does. And this has been Stuart Davidson, the Construction Cashflow Show. Thanks for listening in. See you on the next podcast. Good night.
Thanks, Stuart.
Thanks up, Mark.